The text message from my mother arrived at 7 in the evening, clipped and brutal. "Stay home. Nobody wants you there." Attached was a photo of a cream-colored invitation suite for my twin sister's lavish 25th birthday party. I zoomed in on the printed timeline of our family history and felt the air leave my lungs. According to the glossy cardstock, I ceased to exist the summer after high school. They were not just excluding me, they were editing me out. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany surface of my desk was a short, violent buzz, the kind that usually signaled a weather alert or a bank notification. It was 7 in the evening on a Tuesday. The office was mostly empty, save for the hum of the HVAC system and the cleaning crew moving like ghosts in the hallway. I was 32 years old, a senior logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping firm, and I had spent the last decade building a life that was quiet, predictable, and entirely my own. I turned the phone over. The screen lit up with a message from my mother. "Stay home. Nobody wants you there." My stomach did not drop. That was the reaction of someone who was surprised. Instead, my stomach tightened. A familiar calcification that felt like swallowing a stone I had swallowed 100 times before. Below the text was an image attachment. I tapped it, expanding the photo to fill the screen. It was a picture of an invitation suite, professionally photographed on a bed of silk flowers. The cardstock was heavy, cream-colored with gold foil lettering that caught the light. "Please join the Bailey family in celebrating the 25th birthday of our beloved daughter. Melody." I stared at the number, 25. Melody was my twin sister. We had shared a womb, we had shared a crib, we had shared a birthday cake every year until we were 18, and we had both turned 32 last April. Yet, there it was, printed in expensive, embossed foil, 25th birthday. I zoomed in on the rest of the image. Beside the main invitation was a printed card titled, "Our Family Journey." It was a timeline, a graphical representation of the Bailey legacy. It listed my parents' wedding date. It listed the founding of my father's first consultancy firm. It listed Melody's birth, conveniently sans year, and her graduation from university. It listed her recent appointment as a community ambassador. I was not on the timeline. I scanned the graphic 3 times. I looked for a second birth dot. I looked for my name in the margins. I was simply gone. According to this piece of stationery, my parents had one daughter, and she was 7 years younger than she actually was. They were not just excluding me from a party, they were retroactively editing my existence to fit a new, younger, cleaner narrative. I set the phone down. My hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from a bizarre, vibrating frequency of rage. It was the audacity of it. It was the sheer logistical effort required to lie this big. I tried to turn back to my spreadsheets. I had a container ship docked in Savannah that needed customs clearance documentation by morning. I typed a few numbers, but the digits swam on the screen. A knock on my doorframe made me jump. It was Sarah, one of the junior account managers. She was holding her tablet, her face arranged in an expression of awkward pity that I instantly hated. "Hey, Allison," she said, stepping into my office without waiting for an invitation. "I probably shouldn't bring this up, but I saw something online. I didn't know your family was, like, local celebrities. I kept my face neutral. They are not celebrities, Sarah. They just have a very active homeowners association." She hesitated, tapping her screen. "No, this is on the Arbordale Lifestyle homepage. It is a spotlight feature. The ageless grace of the Bailey family. It popped up on my feed because I follow that bakery your sister uses." Sarah turned the tablet toward me. There they were, my mother, looking impeccably preserved in a linen suit, my father with his silver fox smile, and Melody, who looked exactly like me but with better lighting and a softness around the eyes that I had lost years ago. The headline read, "New Beginnings, How the Baileys Are Reinvesting in Our Future." I scanned the text, my eyes snagging on a paragraph halfway down. While the Baileys are proud of their daughter Melody's rapid ascent in the philanthropic world, they remain protective of their private family struggles. They ask for continued privacy regarding their other daughter, who battles significant personal instability and has chosen a life of isolation. We support her distance, says Patriarch Thomas Bailey. Sometimes, love means letting someone go to find their own wellness. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Instability, isolation, wellness. It was a masterclass in polite destruction. They hadn't called me a criminal or a failure. They had used the soft, concerned language of therapy to paint me as a mental invalid. They had framed my absence, which they enforced, as a symptom of my sickness. I looked up at Sarah. She was watching me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the instability to show. "It is a nice photo," I said, my voice sounding robotic even to my own ears. Sarah blinked, clearly disappointed by the lack of drama. "Right. Well, I just thought you should know. It mentions a big gala tonight, a surprise announcement." I waited for her to leave. As soon as she was gone, I closed my door and locked it. I needed to see the invitation again. I pulled up the text from my mother. "Stay home." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a forwarded email from Jenna, one of the few friends from high school I still spoke to. Jenna was wealthy enough to be in my parents' social orbit, but cynical enough to hate it. Subject: FWD. "You seeing this?" Attachment: event _ details _ Bailey _ gala.pdf. Message: Allie. "I assumed you were sitting this out because you hate them, but I just read the guest guidelines. They literally have a prohibited list at the security checkpoint. I didn't see your name, but the vibe is weird. Also, since when is Melody 25? Did I hallucinate our entire high school experience?" I opened the PDF. The event was being held at the conservatory in Lake Arbordale, a fictionalized upscale township that had been developed 5 years ago and was now the zip code for everyone who wanted to pretend they didn't live in the suburbs. The schedule of events was terrifyingly specific. 7 o'clock, cocktail hour, 8 o'clock, the retrospective video, 9 o'clock, the Bailey Foundation launch and surprise announcement. Guest of honor, Melody Bailey, Foundation. They were launching a foundation. I stared at the screen. My parents were comfortable. Yes, they had money. But they did not have foundation money. You needed serious capital to launch a philanthropic entity that required a gala at the conservatory. I dialed my father. I knew I shouldn't. I knew the text from my mother was the final word. But the discrepancy in the narrative was itching under my skin. The age change, the instability quote, the foundation. He answered on the second ring. "Allison," he said. His voice was warm, the audio equivalent of a cashmere sweater. It was the voice that made everyone trust him. "Hello, Dad," I said. "I am looking at an article that says I am unstable, and I'm looking at an invitation that says my twin sister's 25. He sighed, a long, weary sound that suggested I was being unreasonable. "We are just trying to protect you." "Allie, protect me from what? Mathematics?" "We are rebranding," he said, as if talking about a detergent. "Melody is launching a career in the nonprofit sector. Youth is a currency in that world. People want to support young visionaries. It is a harmless adjustment." "And the part about me being unstable?" I asked, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "That is for your benefit," he said. His tone shifted, becoming firmer. "Look, if you are calling about tonight, don't. We have security. It is better this way. We don't want a scene. I am not going to make a scene. Dad, I just want to know why you are erasing me." "We are not erasing you," he said. "We are respecting your boundaries. You agreed to this." I paused. "What?" "You agreed," he repeated. "We have the document. Allison, you signed the agreement stating you would not attend family events that trigger your episodes. We are just following your written instructions." I stood up. My chair rolled back and hit the wall with a loud clatter. "I never signed anything like that." I said. There was a silence on the other end. A hesitant silence. "Well," he said, his voice losing a fraction of its warmth, "perhaps you do not remember. Memory can be tricky when you are overwhelmed, but we have it on file. Stay home, Allison. It is best for everyone. The line went dead. I stood in the center of my office, the silence ringing in my ears. You agreed to this. I was meticulous. I was a logistics coordinator. I tracked shipping containers across oceans. I did not forget signing documents. I did not forget agreeing to be banned from my own family. I sat back down and opened my personal laptop. I logged into my cloud storage. I searched for every document I had sent my parents in the last 5 years. Tax returns from when I was still on their plan. Car insurance transfers. I found it in a folder marked medical_admin. 2 years ago, I had needed a minor surgery on my knee. My insurance was tied up in a weird lapse between jobs, and my father had offered to bridge the gap with his supplemental policy if I signed a release form allowing him to process the claim. I opened the file. Standard_HIPAA_release_Bailey, PDF. I looked at the date. I looked at the signature. It was my signature, the loop of the A, the sharp cross of the T. Then I looked at the body of the text. I pulled up the metadata. The file size was slightly larger than a standard text PDF. I zoomed in on the pixelation around the paragraphs. The header was the same. The signature block was the same. But the text in the middle, the text I had supposedly read, was different. The font was a match, but the kerning was off by a fraction of a millimeter. I, Allison Bailey, acknowledge that high-stress family gatherings are detrimental to my mental health status and voluntarily agree to absent myself from public family functions to prevent episodes of emotional dysregulation. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. They had lifted my signature. They had taken the digital signature from the insurance form and pasted it onto a document they had written themselves. Or worse, they had altered the text of the document I signed after I returned it. My father believed it. That was the catch in his voice. He truly believed I had signed it, which meant my mother had likely handled the paperwork. This was not just exclusion. This was fraud. And they were using this forged consent to justify telling the world I was crazy. I looked at the clock. It was 7:30. The gala started at 7. If I stayed home, I was proving them right. I was the unstable daughter hiding in the dark. If I crashed the party screaming, I was proving them right. I was the unstable daughter causing a scene. I needed a third option. I picked up my phone and texted Jenna. I need a favor. You have a +1? Jenna replied 3 seconds later. Yes. My husband is in Tokyo. Why? I am coming, but I am not Allison Bailey tonight. I am your quiet friend from the city who is just there for the free champagne. Can you get me in without announcing me? Jenna. The coordinator is that girl from AP English. Tessa. She might recognize you. Me. I will wear my hair up. I will wear glasses. I just need to see what they are doing. Jenna. Please. Jenna. Meet me at the side entrance in 40 minutes. Wear black. I drove to Lake Arbordale in silence. The transition from the highway to the township was jarring. The streetlights changed from industrial sodium orange to charming. Old-fashioned gaslight replicas. The manicured hedges blocked out the reality of the surrounding suburbs. The conservatory was a massive glass structure glowing on a hill, looking like a lighthouse for rich people. Valets in white jackets were running back and forth. I parked my sedan 3 blocks away in a dentist's parking lot and walked. The night air was cool. I was wearing a black cocktail dress I kept in my trunk for client dinners, and I had pulled my hair into a severe chignon. I put on a pair of heavy-framed reading glasses. Jenna was waiting by the caterer's entrance, smoking a vape pen. She looked immaculate in green silk, but her expression was grim. You look like a librarian who is about to murder someone, she whispered as I approached. Good, I said. She handed me a wristband. Do not make me regret this. Allie, if your mom sees you, she will go nuclear. I am not here to talk to her. I said, I am just a ghost. We slipped in through the side doors, bypassing the main check-in desk where I assumed the list of prohibited persons was being guarded. The main hall was breathtaking. The ceiling was 3 stories high. draped in white chiffon and twinkling fairy lights. There were at least 200 people there. A string quartet was playing a pop cover I couldn't place, but it was the branding that stopped me cold. Everywhere I looked, there was a logo, interlocked letters, TMM, the Bailey Foundation. But the third M wasn't an M. It was a stylized A that had been mirrored and twisted to look like an M. It was my initial, distorted to fit their symmetry. I walked deeper into the room, sticking to the shadows near the bar. There was a photo wall near the entrance, a massive vinyl backdrop featuring the timeline I had seen on the invitation. Guests were posing in front of it, holding champagne flutes. Laughing, they were taking selfies in front of a history that said, "I didn't exist." I saw a videographer moving through the crowd, a boom mic hovering over conversations. This wasn't just a party, it was a production. They were building content. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and turned toward the stage. A step-and-repeat banner listed the sponsors: the Bailey Foundation, Generational Wealth Management, Harrow Lyle, Attorneys at Law, Harrow Lyle. I filed the name away. Suddenly, a hand touched my elbow. "Excuse me, ma'am. You can't stand here. This is the staging area for the talent." I froze. I turned slowly. It was Tessa, the girl from AP English. She was wearing a headset and holding a clipboard, looking harried. She didn't recognize me at first. She just saw a woman in black glasses standing in the way. "Oh, sorry," I said, pitching my voice lower. Tessa squinted. She tilted her head. "Allison?" I felt a spike of adrenaline. "Hi, Tessa." She took a step back, her eyes widening. She looked toward the security guards at the front entrance. "Oh my God, you are not supposed to be here. Your mom said—" She lowered her voice to a hiss. "Your mom said you'd stay away unless we had security remove you. She said you might try to hurt Melody." I felt the blood drain from my face. Hurt Melody? I have never touched her in my life. Tessa looked torn. She was a nice person, historically. But she was currently on the payroll of the people spreading the lie. "Look, Allison, I don't want trouble. They paid a lot for this night. It is a big reveal. Please don't ruin it. I am not going to ruin it," I said calmly. "I am just watching." I was invited by a guest. Tessa looked at her clipboard. She tapped her pen against the paper. "Okay, just stay in the back. If I see you near the stage, I have to call it in. Your dad was really specific about the safety protocols." Safety protocols! They had turned me into a hazard. Tessa hurried away as her headset crackled. I exhaled, my heart hammering against my ribs. I moved away from the staging area, tucking myself behind a large floral arrangement of white hydrangeas. From here, I had a view of the green room entrance, a curtained-off section where the family was waiting. The curtain was slightly open. I saw my mother. She was adjusting Melody's sash. Melody was wearing a gown that looked like a wedding dress, pale pink and covered in crystals. She looked beautiful. She looked 25. I edged closer, straining to hear over the string quartet. "Remember," my mother was saying, her voice sharp and instructional. "When they ask about her, you look sad. You look down at your hands. I know." "Mom," Melody said. Her voice was petulant. "You say, Allison chose distance for her wellness, and we respect that. Say it. Allison chose distance for her wellness, and we respect that." Melody recited, "And if they ask why she isn't a board member?" "Because she couldn't handle the pressure of the public eye." Melody said, reciting the script. "Good," my mother said. She smoothed Melody's hair. "You are the face of this. Melody, you are the legacy. We are doing this for the family, for the family." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. My father stepped into the view. "It is time," he said. "The donor representative is ready for the check presentation." I watched them walk out toward the stage, their smiles attaching themselves to their faces like prosthetics. I stayed behind the flowers. My eyes scanned the area they had just vacated. There was a display table set up near the green room, holding framed accolades and photos. I walked over to it. There were photos of Melody volunteering, photos of my parents shaking hands with the mayor, And in the center, a large framed document, the Bailey Foundation Pledge of Commitment. It was a manifesto, a promise to dedicate the family fortune to the betterment of Lake Arbordale. It was dated today. At the bottom were 3 signatures: Thomas Bailey, Martha Bailey, Melody Bailey, and a 4th signature, slightly smaller, off to the side, listed under Founding Benefactor, Allison Bailey. It was my signature, the same one from the insurance document, the same one from the fake agreement. They hadn't just erased me. They were using my name to bankroll the erasure. They had signed me up as a benefactor for a foundation I wasn't allowed to attend the launch of. I stared at the ink. It wasn't wet. It was a high-quality digital print. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I turned off the flash. I framed the shot. Click. I had the proof. Now I just had to survive the party. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, my fingers cold against the metal. The display table was an altar to a lie, and I had just desecrated it with a camera lens. I took 3 more photos, rapid fire, capturing the peripheral materials. There was a brochure titled The Bailey Legacy, Investing in Tomorrow, and a legal disclosure printed in tiny font at the bottom of a poster. I squinted at the text. The Bailey Future Trust Foundation. The name hit me with a jolt of recognition that had nothing to do with charity. The Bailey Future Trust. When I was 22, freshly graduated and terrified of the recession, I had opened a high-yield savings account. I had called it the Bailey Future Fund. It was a stupid, sentimental name for a pot of money meant for a down payment on a condo I still hadn't bought. My parents knew about it because my father had insisted on advising me on the initial deposit. He had seen the paperwork. He knew the name. Now, they had named their foundation almost exactly the same thing. It was a mirror image. It wasn't just lazy branding. It was deliberate. If anyone looked at my financial history, the line between my personal savings and their corporate entity would look blurry. It would look like I was part of it. I backed away from the table, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed to get out of the main hall. The air felt thin, recycled, smelling of expensive lilies and betrayal. I ducked down a service corridor that led toward the restrooms. The walls here were unadorned beige, the glamour of the party stripping away to reveal the industrial skeleton of the venue. A door swung open at the far end of the hallway. Melody stepped out. She stopped when she saw me. She was alone, clutching a tube of lip gloss like a weapon. The pink gown rustled around her, the crystals catching the fluorescent overhead lights. For a second, we just stared at each other. The resemblance was always jarring. Looking at her was like looking in a mirror that smiled more often. But tonight, her face was tight, her eyes narrow. "Allison?" she hissed. "What are you doing here? Mom said you were staying home." I walked toward her. I didn't want to shout. I wanted to understand. I saw the pledge. "Melody," I said, keeping my voice low and level. I saw my signature on the display table. She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just rolled her eyes, a gesture so teenage it almost made me laugh. "Oh, God. Here we go. You always have to make it about you, don't you? It is my birthday. Allison, can you just let me have one night? It is not about your birthday." I said, "It is about forgery. Why is my name on a foundation document I never signed?" Melody took a step closer. Her perfume, vanilla and something sharp, wafting over me. "You signed what you signed," she said. Her voice was icy, stripped of the bubbly warmth she used for the cameras. "You always do. You sign whatever Dad puts in front of you because you are desperate for him to look at you." I recoiled. The truth of it stung more than the malice. "I didn't sign that pledge," I said, "and I didn't sign an agreement to be banned from my own family." Melody laughed. A short, harsh sound. "Banned? You are not banned. You are managed. We are managing the situation. Dad said it was better if we just handled the paperwork for you. You get so emotional about details. Emotional about details. That was the family line. Allison cares too much about the truth. It ruins the vibe. They are lying to the donors." "Melody," I said, "and they are using you to do it." She glared at me, her face flushing pink. They are building a legacy, she snapped. Something real. Not like your boring shipping containers. Go home. Allison, nobody wants you here. You ruin everything. She turned and swept back through the door, leaving me standing in the beige hallway. You signed what you signed. You always do. She knew. She knew about the signature lifting. She knew about the fake consent forms. She wasn't an innocent beneficiary. She was a participant. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. I needed more than photos. I needed to know how deep the paperwork went. I walked back toward the main hall but veered off toward the tech booth. Tessa, the coordinator, was standing by a stack of sound equipment, frantically whispering into her headset. She looked up as I approached, alarm flashing in her eyes. I am not making a scene, I promised, raising my hands. I am leaving. I need a favor. Tessa. She pulled the headset down around her neck. Allison, please, your dad is watching the exits. I just need to see the vendor packet. I said, just the list of who is getting paid. Please, I think my name is on the billing. Tessa shook her head vigorously. I can't. That is confidential client data. Tessa, I said, leaning in, if my name is on the billing and I didn't authorize it, that is fraud. Do you want to be the coordinator for a fraud case? She hesitated. She looked at the tablet in her hand. I can't give you the packet, she whispered. But look, it was weird, okay? The legal billing went to a firm called Harrow Lyle. We had to rush the invoice yesterday. Usually, we bill the client directly, but your dad insisted it go through the firm. And what? And there was a rider on the event contract, a specific clause, no unscripted family members on stage. It was highlighted in red. It named you, Allison. It said if you went on stage, we lose our performance bond. I felt sick. They had contractually obligated the venue to silence me. It wasn't just a request. It was a financial penalty. Thank you. Tessa, I said. I turned to leave, but my phone buzzed in my clutch. A notification from my work email. I usually ignored work after 7, but the preview text made my blood run cold. Subject, urgent, client inquiry, Bailey account. From Jonathan Mills, CEO. I unlocked the phone. Allison, we received a concerning email from the logistics director at Global Imports. They are hesitating on the renewal contract. They referenced a public interest piece circulating about your family that mentions instability and risk factors associated with your name. They are worried about sensitive clearance data being handled by someone with, quote, documented volatility. We need to discuss this first thing tomorrow. I stared at the screen. The floor seemed to tilt. Global Imports was my biggest client. They moved millions of dollars of freight, and they were reading the Arbordale lifestyle. My parents' rebrand wasn't just hurting my feelings, it was nuking my career. They had planted a story to explain why I wasn't at a party, and that story had grown legs and walked right into my boss's inbox. I couldn't stay. I couldn't watch them cut the cake. I couldn't watch them smile. I texted Jenna. I have to go. Emergency. Don't tell them you saw me. I slipped out through the kitchen exit, bypassing the valet. I walked the 3 blocks to the dentist's parking lot, my heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get the key in the ignition on the first try. I felt a wave of hot, crushing shame. Shame that I had come, shame that I had hoped, for a split second, that there was a misunderstanding. Shame that part of me still wanted my father to answer the phone and tell me it was all a mistake. But then the shame curdled into something else. Anger. Cold. Hard. Geometric anger. They were using my credit. They were using my name. They were using my life as a prop for their theater. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I planned. The next morning, I called in sick. It was the first time in 5 years. I told Jonathan I had a family legal emergency and would be in by noon to explain. I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee and my laptop. Step 1. The credit report. I logged into the bureau. I paid the fee for the expedited. Detailed report. I waited for the loading bar to fill, my heart rate sinking with the blinking cursor. The report loaded. I scrolled past my student loans, past my car lease, past my credit card, and there it was. Inquiry. Harrow Lyle, LLP. Reason. Business verification. Date. 3 weeks ago. New account. Arbordale Regional Bank. Type. Small business line of credit. Status. Active. Guarantor. Allison J. Bailey. They had opened a line of credit, not a credit card, a business line. That meant serious liability. If the foundation went under, if they defaulted, the bank would come for me. They would garnish my wages. They would take my imaginary condo. I printed the page. I needed a lawyer, not a family friend, not someone who golfed with my father. I needed a shark. I spent an hour searching for attorneys who specialized in identity theft and family fraud. I found a woman named Maren Holt. Her website was stark, black and white, and her bio said she specialized in complex financial litigation and reputation management. I called her office. Her assistant fit me in for an 11 o'clock consultation after I mentioned the words forged signature and nonprofit fraud. Maren Holt's office was in a glass building downtown, far away from Lake Arbordale. She was a sharp-featured woman with a bob cut that looked like it could slice paper. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. I showed her the photos of the pledge. I showed her the credit report. I showed her the email from my boss. When I finished, she took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly. "This is messy. Allison," she said. Her voice was dry and unsentimental. "I know." I said, "Can we sue them?" "We can," she said, "but proving forgery on a digital document is difficult, especially when the signature is technically yours. Just misappropriated. They will argue you gave verbal consent. They will argue implied permission based on past behavior. Families do this all the time. The line between favor and fraud gets very thin in court. So I can't do anything? No, you can do a lot. But we don't start with a lawsuit. We start with a blockade." She pulled a notepad toward her. "First, we freeze everything. We lock your credit files with all 3 bureaus. We send a formal fraud alert to Arbordale Regional Bank regarding that line of credit. We demand they produce the original wet ink application. If they can't, or if it is a digital paste job, the bank will shut it down internally to avoid liability." "What about the article?" I asked. "My boss." "We send a cease and desist to the lifestyle blog," Maren said, "and to your parents. We demand preservation of all documents. That scares people. It tells them you are not playing the dutiful daughter anymore. You are a litigant." She looked at me, her eyes softening just a fraction. "But I need you to understand something. Allison, this isn't just paperwork. If you do this, you are declaring war. They will not react well. They will say you are attacking your sister's birthday. They will say you are proving the instability rumors true." I thought about the timeline. I thought about Melody's face in the hallway. "You ruin everything. They already declared war." I said, "They just didn't think I would fight back." I left Maren's office with a lighter step. I had a plan. I had a retainer agreement. I sat in my car and dialed the number for the Arbordale Lifestyle. I had found the editor's direct line on the masthead. "This is Editor Daniels," a man's voice answered. "Hi, this is Allison Bailey. I am calling regarding the article, The Ageless Grace of the Bailey Family." "Oh, Miss Bailey." The voice brightened, then hesitated. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Your father mentioned you were taking a break from communications." "My father is incorrect." I said, "I am calling to request a correction. The article states I am private due to past struggles and instability. This is false. It is defamatory, and it is damaging my professional reputation." There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clacking in the background. "Miss Bailey, I understand your concern, but we fact-checked that piece with the family directly. They provided documentation." "Documentation?" I asked. "What kind of documentation?" "Well," the editor stammered, "background emails, summaries of wellness boundaries. It was all very vague. Out of respect for your privacy, of course, But the language about your condition came directly from their press kit. Their press kit. They had a press kit for my mental health. It is a smear campaign wrapped in therapy language, I said, realizing Marin was right. It was genius. If I screamed about it, I looked unstable. If I stayed silent, I accepted the label. I would like to submit a formal rebuttal. I said, I will have to run that by legal, the editor said, his voice cooling. We rely on the primary sources, and frankly, Miss Bailey, your parents are very respected pillars of this community. We wouldn't want to publish anything that looks like a domestic dispute. I hung up. He wasn't going to change it. The narrative was too good. The tragic, broken daughter and the heroic, long-suffering parents. I drove to my office. I had to face Jonathan. The meeting was excruciating. I sat in his office while he read the draft email Marin had helped me write. A calm, legalistic explanation that I was the victim of identity theft and that the rumors were a result of a family dispute over financial assets. Jonathan looked tired. I believe you. Allison, he said, you have been solid for 5 years. But Global Imports doesn't care about truth. They care about risk. If this noise doesn't go away, they walk. And if they walk, I know. I said, I am handling it. I have an attorney. It will stop. I hoped I was telling the truth. That evening, I was exhausted. My bones felt heavy. I ordered takeout and sat on my couch, staring at the wall. My phone pinged. It was Jenna. Hey, I didn't see you leave last night. You okay? I am fine, I typed back. Just had to go. Jenna. It was weird after you left. Your dad gave a toast. He got all choked up. He said something like, we wish Allison could be here, but we have all learned to respect safety plans. People were literally wiping away tears. Allie, it was like a memorial service. I stared at the text. Safety plans. That was the term you used for people who were a danger to themselves. Suicide risks, domestic abusers. They were implying I was dangerous. They were mourning me while I was sitting on my couch eating pad thai. It was a social execution. I felt a surge of nausea. It was so clean, so effective. They got the sympathy. They got the money. And they got to be the saints who loved the broken girl. My phone pinged again. A calendar notification. I frowned. I didn't use my personal calendar for invites. I opened the app. A new event had appeared for Thursday. 48 hours from now. Event. Founders Compliance Meeting. Location. Arbordale Regional Bank. Executive Conference Room B. Attendees, Thomas Bailey, Martha Bailey, Melody Bailey, Allison Bailey. Organizer, admin at Bailey. Foundation.org. I froze. I hadn't accepted this invite. It had been pushed to my calendar automatically, likely because my email address was linked to the old shared family cloud account I hadn't managed to fully decouple yet. Founders Compliance Meeting. They expected me to be there? Or, no, they didn't expect me to be there. They expected me to be a no-show. I clicked on the event details. There was an agenda attached. 1. Review of bylaws. 2. Ratification of officer signatures. 3. Co-founder verification. A. Bailey. They were going to ratify the signatures. If I didn't show up, they would probably say I had called in or signed a proxy. They would use my absence to cement the fraud. They were counting on me staying home. They were counting on the text. Nobody wants you there. I looked at the invite. I looked at the yes/no/maybe buttons. I didn't click any of them. I forwarded the invite to Marin. They scheduled a meeting for me. I typed, I think I should go. Marin replied 2 minutes later. If you go with me, and you bring your driver's license. I set the phone down. The fear was still there. A cold current in my blood. But the anger was hotter. They wanted a co-founder. They were going to get one. The morning of the compliance meeting was overcast. The kind of gray, flat light that made the world look like a photocopy of itself. I met Marin Holt in the parking lot of Arbordale Regional Bank at 8:50 in the morning. She was wearing a charcoal suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy. Ready? she asked. Not wasting time with pleasantries. I nodded. My stomach felt like I had swallowed a handful of gravel, but my hands were steady. I had spent the last 48 hours vibrating with anxiety. But now that the moment was here, a cold, logistical calm had settled over me. I was a logistics coordinator. I dealt with facts. And the facts were on my side. We walked into the branch. It was a local institution, the kind with plush carpet and tellers who gave lollipops to children. We were ushered into Executive Conference Room B, a glass-walled fishbowl near the back. The bank representative, a man named Mr. Henderson who wore a tie that was slightly too wide, stood up as we entered. He looked past us, expecting a crowd. "Good morning," he said, his smile faltering slightly. "I was expecting Thomas and Martha. And Melody. They aren't coming," Marin said smoothly. She set her briefcase on the mahogany table and snapped the latches open. "I am Marin Holt, legal counsel for Allison Bailey, and this is Allison Bailey." Henderson blinked. He looked at me, then at the empty chairs. "Oh, I see. Well, we usually require a quorum for the officer ratification, but if you are here to sign the co-founder affidavit, we can get started." "I am not here to sign," I said. My voice sounded loud in the quiet room. "I am here to report that I never agreed to be a co-founder. My name was added to these documents without my knowledge or consent." Henderson's smile evaporated. He looked at the file folder in front of him as if it might explode. "I don't understand," he said. "We have the incorporation papers right here, signed and notarized, and we have the KYC, Know Your Customer, documentation on file. Show me," Marin said. Henderson hesitated, then slid the folder across the table. Marin opened it. She didn't look at the papers. She slid them to me. I looked down. There it was. The Bailey Future Trust Foundation. Articles of Incorporation. On the signature page, next to my father's sprawling autograph and my mother's tight, cursive script, was my name. It was the same signature from the insurance form. I recognized the slight heavy ink at the top of the A, and behind it was a photocopy of my driver's license. I stared at the image of my face. It was my current license, but the photo was dark, grainy. It wasn't a scan from a card reader. It was a printout of a scan. I remembered, 3 years ago. My car had broken down while I was visiting them for Christmas. My father had offered to rent a car for me so I could get back to the city. But he needed my license information to put the reservation on his platinum card. I had scanned it at their house, on their printer, and emailed it to his personal account. He had kept it. He hadn't stolen my wallet. He hadn't hacked my computer. He had simply opened his sent folder, found a file I had given him in a moment of gratitude, and used it to commit bank fraud. It was so mundane. It wasn't a grand, cinematic betrayal. It was just administrative housekeeping. They had a file on me, and they used the assets in that file to build their foundation. "This is a copy I sent my father 3 years ago for a rental car." I said, "I did not provide this for a bank application." Henderson looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair. "Miss Bailey, we received this directly from the Foundation's organizing partner. Your father submitted it as part of the diligence package. Are you saying Thomas Bailey?" "I am saying I did not authorize this." I cut in. "I am saying I am not a board member. I am not a guarantor, and I want my name removed from this account immediately." Marin stepped in. "We are formally requesting a freeze on this application and an internal fraud review. We want a trace on how these documents were verified. Did you ever speak to Allison Bailey on the phone? Did she ever sign a document in your presence?" Henderson paled. "Well, no. The account was opened under the Foundation's umbrella. We have a long-standing relationship with Thomas. We assume." "You assumed," Marin said. "That is a liability. Mr. Henderson, a significant one." I sat there, watching the banker sweat, and felt a wave of hot, prickly embarrassment. It was humiliating. I was essentially sitting here accusing my parents, pillars of the community, wealth management clients, of being criminals. I was exposing the rot in my own family tree to a stranger in a bad tie, but I forced myself to look at the signature again. Allison Bailey. They had used me. They had risked my financial future so they could have a fourth name on a piece of paper, likely to meet some obscure governance requirement or to make the board look more robust. I was just a resource to them. Freeze it, I said, leaving the bank. The air felt heavier. Marin walked me to my car. They will call your parents within the hour, she said. The bank has to. It is protocol. I know, I said. You don't have to talk to them. Allison, I can handle the communication. No, I said. I unlocked my car door. I need to hear them say it. I need to hear them admit it wasn't an accident. I didn't go back to work. I drove straight to Lake Arbordale. The drive was 40 minutes of white-knuckled silence. I rehearsed what I would say. I rehearsed the anger. But beneath the anger was a terrified child who just wanted her mother to say she was sorry. My parents' house was a sprawling colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was the house I had grown up in, the house where I had learned to be quiet, to make myself small so Melody could be big. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. My key still worked. I walked in. The house smelled of lemon polish and expensive coffee. "Mom?" I called out. She was in the sunroom, arranging hydrangeas in a crystal vase. She looked up, her face arranging itself into a mask of pleasant surprise, though I saw the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Allison," she said, "we didn't know you were coming. Your father is on a call." "I know." I said, "He is on a call with the bank." Her hands stilled on the flowers. She set down a stem of blue petals. "So," she said, "you went to the meeting." "I went to the meeting." "Mom." "I told them I never signed the papers. I told them to freeze the account." She sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Allison, really, was that necessary?" "You are being so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I stared at her. "Mom, you forged my signature. You used my driver's license from a rental car reservation to make me a guarantor on a business loan. That is a felony. It is family business," she snapped, her voice dropping the pleasant veneer. "It is for the legacy. We needed 4 founding officers to qualify for the preferred tax status. Who else were we going to ask? Strangers? You could have asked me." I said, "You could have asked me if I wanted to be involved, and you would have said no." She said, "You always say no. You are so difficult. Allison, you hold on to these grudges. We are building something beautiful. The foundation is going to help the community. And you are trying to destroy it because you didn't get a printed invitation?" I felt like I was speaking a different language. "I am not trying to destroy it. I am trying to protect myself. You told the whole town I was unstable. You told my boss I was volatile. And then you signed me up to be liable for your debts? We are protecting you," she said. "If you are on the board, you have a legacy. You have a future. We did this for you." My father walked into the room. He was holding his phone, his face red. They froze the line. He said, he looked at me, his eyes cold. "You froze the line. Allison, do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Henderson asked me if I had authority issues with my daughter. You forged my signature." "Dad," I said, "it was temporary paperwork," he shouted. He slammed his hand on the doorframe. "We were going to replace you on the board in 6 months once the charter was ratified. It was just a placeholder. We needed a family member." "So I am a placeholder," I said. "That is all I am?" "You are my daughter," he said, lowering his voice to that dangerous, reasonable tone, "and you are acting like an enemy. We are trying to secure the family name." "Give me the originals," I said, "the document with the pasted signature. Give it to me, and I will walk away." He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "The lawyers have the paperwork." "Allison, Harrow Lyle handled the compliance. I don't have time for this petty nonsense. Fix it. Call Henderson and tell him it was a misunderstanding." "No." My father stepped closer. He was a big man, and he used his size to intimidate. "If you don't fix this, Allison, you are cutting yourself off. No inheritance, no safety net, nothing." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had paid for my college, who had also systematically erased me from his life because I wasn't shiny enough. I don't want your safety net. I said, "It is a trap." The front door slammed open. Steps clicked rapidly across the hardwood foyer. Melody burst into the sunroom. She was wearing tennis whites, a sweater draped over her shoulders. She looked frantic. "What is happening?" she demanded. "My card got declined. I tried to pay for lunch at the club and the terminal said, 'Issuer referral.'" She looked at me, and her face twisted. "You," she said, "you froze the accounts, didn't you?" Melody accused, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You are so jealous. I am not jealous." "Melody, I am tired of being used." "You have always been jealous," she screamed. "Ever since we were kids. You couldn't stand it when people looked at me. You had to be the smart one, the serious one. And now that we are actually doing something important, you have to ruin it." She turned to our mother. "Mom, tell her to stop. She is ruining my launch week." My mother went to her, stroking her hair. "Shh, Melody. It is okay. Allison is just having an episode." I watched them. The tableau was perfect. The comforting mother, the victimized golden child, and the dark, unstable force in the corner. It was a script they had been rehearsing for 30 years. I realized then that there was no conversation I could have that would change this. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a plot point. I was the villain they needed to justify their own heroism. "I am leaving." I said, "Nobody stop me." I drove back to my apartment in a daze. I needed to work, but my brain was looping the conversation in the sunroom. Temporary paperwork, just a placeholder. I sat at my desk and opened a new document on my laptop. I named it Timeline of Events. I started typing. Date: 3 years ago. Event: sent driver's license scan to Dad. Date: 2 years ago. Event: signed medical release form. Source of signature. Date: Tuesday. Event: gala launch. Pledge document observed. Date: today. Event: bank confirmation of unauthorized account. I needed more. I needed proof that wasn't just my word against theirs. I pulled up my text history with Tessa. I hesitated, then typed, "Tessa, I know you are in a tough spot, but I'm dealing with a serious legal situation regarding the foundation. My lawyer is asking for documentation regarding the safety plan narrative. Did my parents put that request in writing?" I waited. 10 minutes. 20. My phone buzzed. "Tessa, I can't get involved. Allison, I signed an NDA. Me. If they asked you to spread false medical information about me, that NDA might be void. I am not trying to hurt you. I just need to know I am not crazy." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, a screenshot. It was an email from my mother to the event planning team. Dated 2 months ago. Subject: messaging regarding Allison. Hi team. Regarding the questions about our other daughter, we need to be consistent. Please ensure all staff are briefed to say that Allison is taking space for her stability and that we are respecting her safety plan. It is crucial that we control the narrative so it doesn't distract from Melody's moment. Attached is the approved phrasing. My hands shook as I saved the image. Control the narrative. It was proof. They had premeditated the lie. I added it to the folder. Then, my work email chimed. Subject: meeting regarding client feedback. From Linda G., HR Director. My heart sank. I logged onto the video call. Linda was there, along with Jonathan. Linda looked sympathetic but firm. "Allison," she said, "we have had another inquiry, this time from the compliance officer at one of our vendor partners. They saw the article. They are asking if you have fiduciary responsibilities that might conflict with your role here. Given the instability mentioned, I took a deep breath. Linda, Jonathan, I want to be very clear. I am currently the victim of identity theft and familial fraud. The article is part of a cover-up by the perpetrators. I have retained counsel. We have filed a fraud alert with the bank. This is not a mental health issue. It is a legal one." Linda nodded slowly. "We appreciate your honesty, Allison, and we want to support you, but you work in logistics. Trust is our product. If clients believe you are compromised, it puts the firm at risk." She paused. We aren't taking action today, but we need this noise to stop. If the legal battle becomes public, if it drags the firm's name into a tabloid story, we will have to reassess your position. I understand, I said. I closed the laptop. I was cornered. If I fought them publicly, I lost my job. If I stayed silent, I lost my identity. I called Marin. File the police report. I said, Are you sure? Marin asked. Once we file a report for identity theft, it is a criminal matter. There is no going back. I am sure. I said, They aren't going to stop. They think I'm a placeholder. Show them I am real. Marin moved fast. By 4 o'clock, she had filed a formal report with the Arbordale Police Department. She sent preservation letters to the Arbordale Lifestyle, the event venue, and Harrow Lyle. The response from Harrow Lyle came via email at 5:30. Dear Ms. Holt, we are in receipt of your correspondence. We categorically deny any allegations of impropriety regarding the Bailey Foundation. All actions taken were within the scope of familial understanding and verbal consent previously granted by your client. It is regrettable that a private family dispute is being escalated in this manner. We trust your client will reconsider her aggressive stance for the sake of all parties involved. It was dismissive. They were betting on the fact that no prosecutor would touch a he said, she said between a rich family and their daughter. Marin called me. They are stonewalling, she said, but I have an idea. There is a journalist I have worked with before. Her name is Kira Dane. She writes for a regional watchdog blog called The Ledger. A blog? I asked. She is a real reporter. Marin said, She used to work for the Tribune before they laid everyone off. She specializes in what she calls philanthropy laundering, small-town foundations that exist mostly to move money around for tax breaks. She might be interested. She doesn't care about family drama. Marin said, She doesn't care about your feelings, but she cares about paper trails. If your parents are sloppy with your signature, they might be sloppy with other things. I agreed to meet her. I met Kira Dane at a dive bar on the edge of the city, a place with sticky floors and no artisanal cocktails. Kira was small, sharp, and looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She was typing on a battered laptop when I sat down. Buy me a beer and tell me about the bank, she said without looking up. I bought her a beer. I told her about the signature. I showed her the photos of the pledge letter. I showed her the screenshot from Tessa. Kira listened, her eyes scanning the documents. She didn't offer sympathy. She didn't say, I'm sorry your parents are monsters. Instead, she pointed to the pledge letter. The date. She said, What about it? It is dated Tuesday, she said, but the foundation charter was filed 3 months ago. Why did they wait to launch? I don't know. Melody's birthday? Maybe, Kira said. Or maybe they were waiting for the fiscal quarter to close. Or maybe they were waiting for the seed money to clear. She tapped a key on her laptop and turned the screen toward me. I have been tracking Harrow Lyle, she said. They represent a dozen little foundations in Arbordale. Most of them are harmless tax shelters. But the Bailey one? It is moving fast. She pulled up a spreadsheet. I pulled the public filings this morning. Kira said, The Bailey Future Trust isn't just a grant-giving body. It is a holding company. Holding what? I asked. Real estate. Mostly. But look at this. She clicked on a tab marked draft_filings. This hasn't been submitted yet, she said. I have a source in the county clerk's office who lets me peek at the intake queue. This is a draft application for a second entity, a subsidiary. I looked at the screen. Entity name, the Arbordale Heritage Preservation Group. Board of Directors, Thomas Bailey, Martha Bailey, Melody Bailey. And there it was again, Allison Bailey. My name. What is this? I asked. Kira took a sip of her beer. The Heritage Preservation Group is currently in negotiations to purchase the old mill building downtown, she said. It is a historic property. The city is desperate to sell it. The plan is to turn it into a community arts center. That sounds good, I said. Confused? It sounds great, Kira said. Except the purchase is being funded by community donations and private loans. High-interest private loans. She looked at me, her eyes hard. If the project fails, the foundation doesn't pay back the loans. The directors do. I felt the blood drain from my face. They are putting me on the hook for a building? They are putting you on the hook for the risk, Kira corrected. They get the photo op. They get to cut the ribbon and look like saviors of the old mill. But if the renovation goes over budget, or if the donations dry up, the creditors come after the guarantors. She pointed to my name on the screen. You aren't just a placeholder, Allison. You are a shield. They are building a financial bunker, and they are using your credit score as the sandbags. I stared at the glowing screen. The bank account was just the start. They were leveraging me into a massive real estate deal. This isn't just about excluding me from a party. I whispered. No, Kira said. It is a heist. And you are the getaway car. The screen of Kira's laptop was the only source of light in the booth, casting a blue pallor over the sticky table. I stared at the spreadsheet she had opened, trying to make the rows of numbers resolve into something that made sense. So, let me get this straight, I said, rubbing my temples. My parents are buying the old mill. They are not buying it, Kira corrected. She took a sip of her warm beer. The Arbordale Heritage Preservation Group is buying it. Your parents are just the directors. The old mill was a crumbling brick structure on the edge of the river. For 20 years, it had been a political hot potato. Developers wanted to knock it down for condos. Preservationists wanted to turn it into a museum. It was a money pit. The city had been trying to offload it for a decade. And the price? I asked. $2.5 million, Kira said, plus another $3 million in estimated renovations. I looked at the funding column. Source, private equity loan, bridge, guarantors, board of directors. If this goes through, Kira said, tapping the screen, your parents get to stand on the steps of the mill and cut a ribbon. They get to save the town's history. They become civic heroes. But if the renovation costs balloon, and they always do with buildings that old, or if the fundraising gala doesn't pull in enough cash to service the debt, the bank calls the loan. And since the preservation group has no assets yet, I said, finishing the thought, they go after the guarantors. Exactly. Kira looked at me. You are looking at a liability of over $5 million. Allison, and your name is right there on the draft application. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't just about using my name to make the board look full. This was a calculated transfer of risk. They were hedging their bets with my credit score. If the project succeeded, they took the credit. If it failed, I took the fall. I need the source of that signature, I said. Standing up. Where are you going? Kira asked. To the law office, I said. I am done asking the bank to freeze things. I want to know who physically pressed paste. Harrow Lyle was located in a renovated brownstone on Main Street, the kind of building that smelled of old money and leather polish. It was 2 p.m. I walked past the receptionist, who was busy on a headset, and headed straight for the cluster of cubicles behind the mahogany partition. This was where the actual work happened. The paralegals, the legal assistants, the people who generated the paperwork the partners signed. I didn't know who I was looking for, but I spotted a young man near the copier. He looked about 24, harried, with his tie loosened and a stain on his shirt cuff. He was holding a file folder marked Bailey Foundation. Urgent. Excuse me, I said, stepping into his path. He jumped, clutching the file to his chest. Oh, I am sorry. I was just taking this to Mr. Harrow. I am Allison Bailey. I said. His eyes widened. He looked at me with a flash of recognition, then fear. Oh, Ms. Bailey. We were told you might call, but I didn't know you were coming in. I am here to sign the updated guarantor forms. I lied. My father said there was a formatting issue with the signature block on the heritage application. The lie was a gamble, but I banked on the fact that junior employees were terrified of messing up high-profile client paperwork. The paralegal hesitated. He looked at the file in his arms. Right, the formatting issue. Yeah, the resolution was a little low on the last one. He walked back to his desk, motioning for me to follow. He sat down and clicked his mouse, waking up his computer. I actually have the template open. He said, Mrs. Bailey sent over the new file this morning, but I haven't had a chance to swap it out yet. She said the one from the insurance form was getting too grainy because we had resized it so many times. I froze. Mrs. Bailey sent the template? I asked, keeping my voice very, very steady. Yeah, he said, typing a password. She has a master file. She said to use the 2024 clean version. She mentioned you were traveling and couldn't come into WetSign, so we should just apply the template as usual. He turned the screen toward me. There it was, a folder named Bailey_signatures. Inside were high-resolution scans of my father's signature, my mother's signature, Melody's signature, and mine had file history. Date created, 2 years ago. Last modified, yesterday. They had a library. They had a digital stamp of my legal identity that they applied whenever they needed it. Wait, I said, pointing to the screen. That file path. Who emailed that to you? Your mother, he said, looking confused. From her personal account. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the screen before he could stop me. Hey, he yelped, trying to block the monitor with his hand. You can't do that. That is work product. Thank you, I said. You have been very helpful. I turned and walked out. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. My mother had a folder on her computer specifically designed to forge my consent. I didn't go back to work. I went home to my apartment, locked the deadbolt, and sat in the dark. I felt violated in a way that was hard to articulate. It wasn't physical, but it felt physical. It felt like they had reached inside my ribcage and taken something essential, then photocopied it and sold it. At 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I ignored it. I assumed it was a neighbor. Allison? It's Mom. Open up. The voice was soft, muffled by the wood. I sat perfectly still on my couch. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to disappear, but the knocking continued, gentle but persistent. A rhythmic guilt trip. Allison, I know you are in there. I saw your car. Please, I brought those almond pastries you like from the bakery. I stood up. I walked to the door and opened it. My mother stood in the hallway. She was wearing a beige trench coat and holding a white bakery box tied with string. She looked tired. Her makeup was perfect, but there was a tightness around her mouth. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped back. She walked into my apartment, her eyes scanning the space. It was a modest place, clean but small. She always looked at my furniture as if it were temporary, something I would upgrade once I stopped being difficult. She set the box on the kitchen counter. I was worried about you, she said. You didn't answer my texts. I didn't get any texts. I said, oh, well, maybe the service is bad. She began untying the string on the box. I just wanted to see you. We haven't really talked since the misunderstanding at the bank. Misunderstanding, I repeated. Is that what we are calling felony fraud now? Allison, please. She opened the box. The smell of almond paste and butter filled the kitchen. It was a scent from my childhood, a scent that used to mean safety. Now it smelled like a bribe. Sit down, she said. Have a pastry. I remained standing. Why are you here? Mom? She sighed, dusting flour from her hands. She leaned against the counter, crossing her ankles. I am here because you are hurting your sister, she said. Her voice was low, laced with a sadness that felt performative. This investigation? Freezing the accounts? It is crushing Melody. She has worked so hard on this launch. She cries herself to sleep every night because she thinks you hate her. I don't hate her. I said, I hate that she is an accomplice to identity theft. She is not an accomplice, my mother said sharply. She is a visionary, and you are confused. I laughed, a harsh sound. Confused? I went to Harrow and Lyle today. I saw the file. Mom, I saw the signature template you emailed them. 2024, clean. You have a digital stamp of my name. My mother didn't flinch. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed, as if I had found a Christmas present early. We handle the administration for the whole family. Allison, We have templates for your father, for Melody, for me. It is efficiency. We didn't want to bother you with paperwork every time we needed to move assets around. You are buying a building. I said, you are taking out a $3 million loan in my name. That is not moving assets. That is moving liability. It is an investment, she insisted. And when the mill opens, you would have been thanked. You would have been on the plaque. I don't want to be on the plaque, I shouted. The silence that followed was heavy. My mother looked at me with pity. You are so angry, she said softly. You have always been this way. So rigid, so unable to see the big picture. She took a step toward me. Allison, look at me. We are your family. We love you. But we need you to stop this legal nonsense. You are embarrassing us. You are embarrassing yourself. If this goes to court, do you think people will believe you? They know your history. What history? I asked. The history you invented? The safety plans you wrote? The history of you being difficult, she said, of you pulling away, of you not fitting in. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was warm. Just pause the lawyer, she said. Just for a month. Let the funding go through for the mill. Let Melody have her moment. Then we can sit down and restructure everything. I promise. It was the trap. The familiar, warm, suffocating trap. Just give in. Just be the reasonable one. Just sacrifice your safety so we can feel good. For a second, I wanted to say yes. I wanted the tension to end. I wanted to eat the pastry and have my mother look at me with approval. But then I thought about the text. Nobody wants you there. I thought about the paralegal's face. I thought about the debt. Get out. I said, Allison, get out of my apartment, Mom, and take the pastries. She stared at me for a long moment. Then the warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, flat disappointment. You are making a mistake, she said. You are choosing to be alone. She closed the box, retied the string with precise movements, and walked out the door. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. You are choosing to be alone. Was I? Was I the problem? Maybe I was rigid. Maybe other families did this. Shared signatures, blurred lines. Maybe I was blowing it up because I was jealous. Just like Melody said, the doubt was a physical weight. It sat on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like I was 12 years old again, sitting in my room while my parents and Melody laughed downstairs, wondering what I had done wrong to be excluded. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Melody. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again. I picked up. What? I whispered. She was crying. I could hear the wet, hiccuping sounds of her breath. Allie? Came her voice, small and thick. I am here, I said. Mom came home and said you kicked her out. Melody sobbed. She said you are trying to ruin the mill purchase. I am not trying to ruin it. I said, I am trying to get my name off the loan. Melody, I can't afford a $3 million debt. It won't be a debt, Melody insisted. We have donors lined up. It is going to be amazing. Why can't you just trust us? Because you lied to me. I said, you sent me an invitation with a timeline that erased my life. You told the whole town I was crazy. I didn't write the timeline, Melody cried. Mom did. I just went along with it. But you knew about the safety plan. I said, you recited the lines. I heard you rehearsing. Allison chose distance for her wellness. There was a silence on the line. It is just what we say, Melody said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It is just how we keep things calm. You know how Dad gets when people ask questions. He hates questions. We just needed a story that made sense. A story that made sense. I realized then that Melody wasn't the mastermind. She was just another prop. She had accepted the role of the golden child because it was easier than fighting, just as I had accepted the role of the scapegoat. Melody, I said gently, keeping things calm for them means destroying things for me. Do you understand that? I didn't know about the credit line. She said, I swear. Allie, I thought you signed the papers. Dad said you signed them. He lied to you too. I said, she sniffled. But you can't sue us. Allie, please, if you sue, the papers will pick it up. My ambassadorship, everything will fall apart. I am sorry. Melody. I said, I really am, but I have to save myself. I hung up. The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple. I dragged myself out of bed, my eyes gritty. I had a message from Kira. Call me. Urgent. I called her while I was making coffee. What is it? I asked. I found something on the seed donation. Kira said. Her voice was sharp, awake. The seed donation was the initial influx of cash that had launched the foundation, the money that proved to the bank they were solvent. I traced the donor. Kira said, the ledger lists a Arthur Pendleton as the primary benefactor. $20,000. Okay, I said. Who is Arthur Pendleton? He was a retired dentist in Lake Arbordale. Kira said, wealthy, no kids. Was? He died in November. Allison. I looked at the calendar. It was February. The foundation launched on Tuesday. I said, exactly, Kira said. The check was dated January 15th, 2 months after he died. I gripped the counter. Someone signed a dead man's check? Or someone had access to his accounts? Kira said, did your father manage his portfolio? Yes, I said. My father manages half the portfolios in Lake Arbordale. Then this isn't just about borrowing your name. Kira said, if your father moved money from a deceased client's account to fund his own foundation, that is embezzlement. That is prison time. I felt nauseous. Are you sure? I asked. I have the death certificate and the filing date. Kira said, I am sure. I hung up the phone. I sat on the floor of my kitchen. My father wasn't just a controlling patriarch. He was a criminal, and he had woven me into his crime. If the foundation went down for fraud, and I was listed as a co-founder and board member, the investigation would sweep me up too. I would have to prove I wasn't involved. I called Marin. We need to go public. I said, we need to tell the police about the Pendleton check. Marin was silent for a long moment. Allison, listen to me carefully. If you accuse Thomas Bailey of embezzlement, you are dropping a nuclear bomb on Lake Arbordale. He manages the retirement funds of half the city council. He is the treasurer of the Rotary Club. I don't care, I said. He stole from a dead man, if you are wrong, Marin warned, or if he has some obscure power of attorney that covers this. He will sue you for everything you have, and the town, they will hate you. You will be the daughter who tried to destroy her father's legacy. They will believe the instability narrative because it is easier than believing their money manager is a crook. I know. I said, think about it. Allison, once you pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels. I spent the afternoon walking through the park near my office. I felt unmoored. I was 32 years old, and I felt like an orphan. I sat on a bench and scrolled through my phone. I was looking for something, anything to ground me. I opened my old voicemails. I had saved them for years, transferring them from phone to phone. I scrolled past the messages from ex-boyfriends, past the reminders from dentists. I found one from 3 years ago. Nana. My grandmother had been my mother's mother, but she had been nothing like her. She had been rough around the edges, a woman who smoked slim cigarettes and told the truth. I pressed play. Alley cat, it is Nana. I am just calling to say I saw that picture you sent of your new apartment. It looks small, but it looks like yours. That is what matters. Listen to me. Keep your own keys. Keep your own name. Never let anyone borrow your name. Sweetheart, not for a loan, not for a marriage, not for anything. It is the only thing you own, free and clear. Call me back. I listened to it 3 times. Never let anyone borrow your name. She had known. She had known what they were like. She had seen the way my father operated, the way my mother smoothed over the cracks. It hit me like a physical blow, a wave of grief. But also clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I was just the only one who had refused to be borrowed. I wiped my eyes. I felt steadier. The shaky feeling in my hands was gone. I wasn't going to be nice anymore. I wasn't going to pause for melody. I was going to take my name back. I walked back to my office. Jonathan called me in as soon as I sat down. He looked uncomfortable. He had a file on his desk. "Allison," he said, "we need to talk about the future." "Am I fired?" I asked. "No," he said, "but the client situation is untenable. Global Imports is demanding a review of all personnel with access to their clearance codes. They specifically flagged the reputational risk associated with the Bailey lawsuit." He slid a paper across the desk. "We have an opening in the Briarhaven office," he said. "It is 3 hours away, different region, different client base. The Arbordale rumors won't follow you there. Briarhaven, it was a college town. Quiet, leafy, if you transfer," Jonathan said. "We can frame it as a promotion, a fresh start. But you have to keep the legal situation contained. If this turns into a criminal circus, corporate might step in." I looked at the offer letter. It was a lifeline. I could move. I could run away from the mess. I could let my parents have their foundation and their fraud, and I could just disappear. "I will think about it," I said. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the highway. I checked my mail. There was a thick envelope with a return address I recognized. Harrow Lyle, Attorneys at Law, certified mail, return receipt requested. I tore it open in the hallway. Cease and desist / notice of defamation. Dear Ms. Bailey, we represent Thomas and Martha Bailey and the Bailey Future Trust. It has come to our attention that you have been contacting charitable partners, vendors, and banking institutions, making wild and unsubstantiated claims regarding the validity of the Foundation's governance. Your actions constitute tortious interference and defamation per se. Furthermore, your erratic behavior and harassment of the Foundation's staff align with the documented history of personal instability previously noted by the family. We hereby demand that you cease all communication with third parties regarding the Foundation. Failure to comply will result in immediate litigation seeking damages for reputational harm. Enclosed is a copy of a sworn affidavit from Dr. Aris Thorne, attesting to your history of emotional dysregulation, which will be entered into evidence should this matter proceed to court. I stared at the name, Dr. Aris Thorne. He was a family friend, a psychiatrist my parents played bridge with. I had never been his patient. I had never spoken to him professionally, but my parents had gotten him to sign an affidavit saying I was crazy. They weren't just defending themselves. They were weaponizing the medical system against me. They were willing to destroy my credibility, my career, and my sanity to protect their building purchase. I looked at the letter. Then I looked at the offer from Jonathan. Briarhaven was safety. But this letter, this was war. They were betting that I would be too scared to fight. They were betting that the unstable daughter would fold under the weight of legal letterhead. I walked into my kitchen. I put the letter on the counter next to the empty space where the pastries had been. I wasn't going to Briarhaven. Not yet. I picked up my phone and texted Kira. They threatened to sue me. They have a fake doctor's note. Kira replied instantly. Good. That means they are scared. Let's burn them down. Myron read the letter from Harrow Lyle with the dispassionate focus of a surgeon examining an X-ray, the threats of defamation and the invocation of Dr. Thorne's affidavit lay on her mahogany desk between us, looking like weapons that had been drawn but not yet fired. They are trying to scare you into silence, Marin said. Finally looking up, it is a standard intimidation tactic. If they can frame you as mentally incompetent, any legal action you take looks like a symptom of your illness rather than a defense of your rights. I sat in the leather chair opposite her, feeling a cold, vibrating anger. They got a psychiatrist I have never met to sign a statement about my mental health. That has to be illegal. It is unethical. Certainly, Marin said. Whether it is illegal depends on how they phrased it. If Dr. Thorne says he has observed behavior in a social setting, he might wiggle out of a malpractice suit, but we are not going to debate your sanity. Allison, that is the trap. If we argue about your mental health, we are playing on their board. She opened her laptop and began typing. We are going to respond with a notice of unauthorized use of identity. She said, we are sending it to the foundation, to Harrow Lyle, and to every vendor and partner we can identify. We are not asking for an apology. We are legally demanding the immediate removal of your name from all entity materials, citing forensic evidence of signature misappropriation. She paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. And we are demanding a forensic audit of the board's formation. We are going to make the cost of keeping your name on that paperwork higher than the cost of removing it. I watched her work. Marin was fighting with paper. I needed to fight with something else. I looked at the timeline I had built on my own computer the night before. I had been staring at the date of Melody's party. Tuesday. The foundation launched on a Tuesday. Why a Tuesday? I asked aloud. Marin glanced up. What? Who throws a black tie gala on a Tuesday night? I asked. It is inconvenient. People have work the next day. Unless... I pulled up the state's incorporation filing requirements on my phone. Unless Tuesday was the deadline for something. I said, I searched the state commerce website. Fiscal quarter filing deadlines. Grant application cycles. There it was. State Historic Preservation, grants. Spring cycle. Application deadline. Midnight. Wednesday, February 25th. The party was on the 24th. They needed the foundation to be publicly launched and legitimate before the grant deadline on Wednesday. I realized the party wasn't just a birthday, it was a timed distraction. They needed the press photos, the surprise announcement, and the donor pledges to attach to the grant application the next morning. And they needed a full board to qualify. Marin added, catching on. That is why they couldn't wait for you to agree. They needed 4 officers listed on the application to meet the governance threshold for that specific grant. They didn't want me, I said, the bitterness coating my tongue. They wanted a 4th signature to get state money for the old mill. Marin hit the enter key with a satisfying clack. Then let's tell the state about their 4th signature. The meeting with the state oversight contact was arranged by Kira. We met in a coffee shop in the state capital. An hour's drive away, the contact was a man named Mr. Eccleston, a mid-level investigator with the Charities Bureau who looked like he was made entirely of beige linen and exhaustion. He stirred his black coffee and looked at Kira with skepticism. Ms. Dane, I appreciate the tip, he said, his voice dry. But family disputes over board seats are not really our jurisdiction. If the daughter wants off the board, she can resign. We don't police Thanksgiving dinner arguments. It is not a dispute, I said, leaning forward. It is identity theft. I never agreed to be on the board. My signature was digitally lifted from a medical release form and pasted onto the incorporation documents. Eccleston looked at me, his eyes flicking to the file folder Marin had prepared. That is a police matter, Ms. Bailey. We filed a police report. Marin said, but this concerns the integrity of the grant application your office is currently reviewing for the Old Mill project. Eccleston sighed. We review hundreds of applications. Unless there is financial malfeasance, there is a check from a dead man. Kira said. She dropped a copy of the check onto the table. It landed between the sugar packets and the napkins. Eccleston stopped stirring. He looked down. What is this? That is the seed donation that capitalized the Bailey Future Trust. Kira said, $20,000 from Mr. Arthur Pendleton, dated January 15th. And? Eccleston asked. Arthur Pendleton died on November 10th. Kira said, we have the death certificate attached. Eccleston picked up the paper. He looked at the check. He looked at the death certificate. Then he looked at me. Who controls the Pendleton estate? He asked. The exhaustion was gone from his voice, replaced by the sharp, predatory interest of a bureaucrat who had just found a reason to work. My father, Thomas Bailey. I said, he is the executor and the portfolio manager. Eccleston took a slow sip of his coffee. He didn't put the paper back down. He slid it into his briefcase. I see, he said. He pulled out a small notebook. I cannot confirm or deny an investigation, he said formally. But I would suggest, Ms. Bailey, that if you have any other documentation regarding the provenance of that signature, you forward it to my office immediately. We stood up to leave. One more thing, Eccleston said. The Bailey Foundation is presenting their proposal to the Lake Arbordale Community Council tonight. It is a public requirement for the historic zoning variance. I know. I said, usually, these things are a rubber stamp, he said. But if someone were to ask specific questions about donor verification on the public record, it would force us to open a file. He gave me a look that was almost a smile, then turned back to his coffee. The Lake Arbordale Community Council met in the town hall. A brick building that smelled of floor wax and civic duty, the meeting room was packed. My parents had mobilized their entire social circle. I saw neighbors, members of the garden club, and the entire staff of the event planning company. At the front of the room, my parents sat behind a long table, looking like royalty in exile. My father wore a navy suit that signaled authority. My mother wore pearls and an expression of benevolent patience. Melody was there, too, sitting slightly behind them, looking young and eager. I walked in with Kira. We didn't sit in the front. We stood in the back, near the camera tripod that was recording the session for the public access channel. I saw heads turn. I saw the whispers ripple through the room like a breeze through a wheat field. That's the other one. The unstable one. My mother saw me. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then she smiled. A sad, brave smile that said, "Look how much I love my broken child." The council chair, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who had known me since kindergarten, banged her gavel. Next item on the agenda, she announced, the proposal by the Arbordale Heritage Preservation Group regarding the acquisition of the old mill property. My father stood up. He was excellent at this. He spoke about legacy. He spoke about the responsibility of wealth. He spoke about saving the soul of the town. He showed slides of the renovated mill, filled with happy children and art classes. "We are not just buying a building," he said, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. "We are investing in the future of Lake Arbordale, and we are doing it as a family. My wife, my daughters, and I have pledged our personal credit and our hearts to this project." The audience applauded. It was warm, rapturous applause. They loved him. They wanted to believe him. Mrs. Gable smiled. "Thank you, Thomas. It is truly a generous gift. We will now open the floor for questions regarding the governance and funding of the project." Two people asked soft questions about parking and noise ordinances. My father answered them easily, charmingly. Then I walked to the microphone. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the electric lights. I adjusted the stand. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the council members. "State your name and address for the record," Mrs. Gable said, her voice tight. "Allison Bailey, 14 Oak Street." I said. My mother stood up halfway. "Madam Chair," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound maternal. "If I may, my daughter is going through a difficult time. We are so proud of her for being here, but I worry that the pressure of a public forum might be overwhelming for her." She looked at me with wet, pleading eyes. "Allison, honey, we can talk about this at home. You don't have to do this." A murmur of sympathy went through the crowd. Poor Martha, dealing with a scene. I felt the old reflex to shrink, to apologize, to back down so they wouldn't look at me with that mixture of pity and annoyance. But then I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket, where the recording of my grandmother's voice was saved. "Keep your own name. I am fine." "Mother," I said into the microphone. My voice was flat, professional, stripping the emotion out of the air. "I have a question regarding the governance structure listed in the application." My mother sat down slowly, looking as if she had been slapped. I turned to the council. "The application lists 4 board members as guarantors for the private equity bridge loan." I said, "Can the board confirm that all 4 members have physically signed the loan documents in the presence of a notary? And can they produce the minutes of the meeting where this debt was authorized?" My father leaned into his microphone. He chuckled, a condescending sound. "Well, Allison, as you know, administrative details are handled by our council. We have all consents on file. This is standard procedure. I did not ask if it was standard. I asked if it was verified. Specifically, has the board verified the consent of the member listed as Allison Bailey, given that there is currently a fraud alert on her credit file regarding this specific entity? The room gasped. It wasn't a murmur this time. It was a sharp intake of breath. My father's face turned a dark, mottled red. This is neither the time nor the place to air personal grievances, he snapped. It is a financial question. Mr. Bailey, I said, if one of the guarantors claims identity theft, the financing for this project is void. Is the council prepared to accept liability for a project funded by disputed assets? Mrs. Gable looked alarmed. She shuffled her papers. Thomas, is there a dispute? My mother grabbed the microphone. There is no dispute, she cried, her polish cracking. Allison is simply confused. She has been under a lot of stress. We are handling it. We love her. But she is not well. It was the card, the instability card. She played it with desperation. Then Kira stepped up to the microphone behind me. I have a question, she said. Her voice was like a razor blade. State your name, Mrs. Gable said. Kira Dane, reporter for the Ledger. My question is regarding the seed funding. The financial disclosure lists a $20,000 donation from an Arthur Pendleton, dated January 15th of this year. My father froze. He went absolutely still, like a prey animal sensing a predator. Can the board explain how Mr. Pendleton signed a check 2 months after his death? Kira asked. And can the board confirm that the executor of his estate is also the president of this foundation? The silence that followed was different. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy. It was the sound of a story breaking. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the bank representative sitting in the front row. The representative looked down at his shoes. My father stammered. That is a clerical error. The check was written before. The date on the check is January. Kira said, he died in November. That is not a clerical error. Mr. Bailey, that is fraud. My mother stood up. This is outrageous. We are donating our lives to this town. How dare you? But the spell was broken. The audience wasn't looking at them with adoration anymore. They were looking at them with confusion. They were looking at the cracks in the porcelain. Mrs. Gable banged the gavel. I think we need to table this vote pending a review of the financial disclosures. She said, meeting adjourned. The chaos after the meeting was immediate. People were standing up, whispering, pointing. My parents were surrounded by a tight ring of their supporters. But the air around them was toxic. My father was shouting at the bank representative. My mother was weeping, clutching Melody's arm. I turned to leave. I didn't want to watch them crumble. I just wanted it on the record. As I reached the double doors at the back of the hall, I felt a hand on my sleeve. It was Tessa, the event coordinator. She looked pale. She was holding a small silver USB drive in her palm. Take it, she whispered. What is it? I asked. I don't want my name on this, Tessa said. Her voice was shaking. I saw what happened in there. If they are forging checks, I can't be part of the cover-up. She pressed the drive into my hand. It is the email chain, she said. The edits to the safety plan, and the metadata from the printer logs where they scanned your signature. I kept a backup. Thank you. Tessa, I said. She didn't wait for more. She turned and ran back toward the crowd, disappearing into the coats and the noise. I walked out into the cool night air. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline crash. Allison. The voice was shrill, hysterical. Melody ran down the steps of the town hall, her heels clacking on the concrete. Her face was streaked with mascara. You ruined it, she screamed. She grabbed my arm, digging her nails into my coat. You ruined everything. They tabled the vote. Let go of me. Melody, I said. Why did you do that? She wailed. Why couldn't you just shut up? Mom is crying. Dad might get investigated. You destroyed us. I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had shared my face but never my reality. She was 25 years old in a 32-year-old body, trapped in a childhood that never ended because my parents needed her to be dependent. I didn't destroy anything. Melody, I said, I told the truth. The truth? She spat. The truth is that you are jealous and hateful and you want us to fail. I pulled my arm free. I looked her in the eye. I am removing my name from your lies. Melody, that is all I am doing. I am taking back what is mine. She stared at me. She opened her mouth to recite the script. The Allison is difficult. Allison is unstable script. But the words died in her throat. Because I wasn't playing the role anymore. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't crying. I was just a wall she couldn't break. Go back inside. I said, they need you to comfort them. That is your job, isn't it? She flinched. She looked at the closed doors of the town hall, then back at me. For a second, I saw terror in her eyes. The terror of someone realizing the play is over and she doesn't know who she is without the costume. Then she turned and ran back up the stairs, fleeing back to the safety of the dysfunction. I drove to Marin's office. It was 10 o'clock at night. The city was quiet. Marin was waiting for me. Kira was there too, typing furiously on her laptop. Did you get it? Marin asked. I held up the USB drive. Tessa gave me the logs. I said, good, Marin said. She took the drive and plugged it into her computer. This is the nail in the coffin. We have the internal communications proving they manufactured the instability narrative to discredit you preemptively. She picked up a stack of papers. I am filing for an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. Marin said, we are asking the court to freeze all assets of the Bailey Future Trust and the Heritage Preservation Group pending a forensic audit. We are attaching the police report, the affidavit from the bank, and now, the witness testimony regarding the Pendleton check. She looked at me. This is the point of no return. Allison, once I file this, the court takes over. Your parents will lose control of the entities. They will likely face criminal charges for the Pendleton matter. I nodded. I felt a deep, exhausted sadness. I didn't want them to go to prison. I just wanted them to stop. Do it, I said. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Bailey? This is the fraud department at Arbordale Regional Bank. It wasn't Henderson. It was a woman's voice, crisp and anonymous. Yes, I said. We are calling to inform you that following the public statements made at the town council meeting this evening, the bank has initiated a Level 1 review of all accounts associated with Thomas Bailey and the Bailey Future Trust. Okay, I said, Ms. Bailey, the woman continued, her voice devoid of emotion. During our preliminary audit tonight, we found irregularities in 4 other documents associated with the credit line application. It appears that tax returns submitted as proof of income for the guarantors may have been altered. I closed my eyes. Altered how? I asked. The income verification for your name lists an employment salary from a company called Bailey Consulting, the woman said. Did you authorize this submission? No, I whispered. I don't work for Bailey Consulting. I assumed as much. She said, this is now a federal banking matter. We are legally required to notify the authorities. We advise you to have your counsel available tomorrow morning. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The room was silent. Marin and Kira were watching me. It wasn't just the signature, I said, my voice sounding hollow. They faked tax returns. They created a fake salary for me to qualify for the loan. Marin closed her eyes and exhaled a long breath. That is bank fraud, she said quietly. That is federal. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights. I had started this to get an apology. I had started this to get my name off a list. But you can't just pull one thread. My parents had built a castle out of paper, and they had used me as a load-bearing wall. Now that I had moved, the whole thing was coming down, and it was going to crush them. I felt a strange, terrible clarity. I wasn't the unstable one. I was the only thing that had been holding them up, and I had just let go. The fallout from the bank freeze was immediate and acoustic. My phone did not just ring. It vibrated with a manic, terrified intensity that seemed to shake the entire surface of my desk. The freeze on the credit line had triggered a domino effect. The bridge loan for the old mill purchase was contingent on the liquidity of the foundation, and the foundation's liquidity was now flagged as under federal review. I did not answer the calls. I sat in my living room, watching the names flash on the screen. Dad, Mom, Dad, Dad, home. They left voicemails. I listened to them in the order they arrived, charting the emotional disintegration of the people who raised me. The first was from my father. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice of a man used to fixing problems with a checkbook. Allison, pick up. There is a misunderstanding at the bank. They seem to think you initiated a fraud alert. Call Henderson immediately and tell him you authorized the guarantor status. We have a closing deadline on Friday. This is not a game. The second was from my mother. She sounded breathless, as if she were walking fast. Allie, please, your father is having chest pains. You are killing him. Is that what you want? To kill your father over a piece of paper? We did this for you. We wanted you to have a legacy. Please, just call the lawyer and sign the waiver. We can fix this. The third was from my father again. 3 hours later. The control was gone. You ungrateful child. You are destroying this family. Do you know who I had to call today? Do you know who is asking questions? You are embarrassed? I will show you embarrassed. If you don't lift this freeze by morning, I will release the full medical file. I will ruin you. Allison, I saved the audio file. I forwarded it to Marin. Evidence of coercion. I typed. My hands were not shaking anymore. I felt a strange, cold clarity. For 32 years, I had been afraid of their anger. I had adjusted my life, my personality, and my choices to avoid exactly this tone of voice. But now that it was here, hearing it through the speaker, it didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like a tantrum. They were not gods. They were just people who had run out of money. The next morning, Marin called me into her office to prepare for the state investigator. Mr. Eccleston had referred the case to a senior investigator from the State Attorney General's Charities Bureau. A woman named Investigator Vance wanted a formal, sworn statement. Marin sat across from me, her hands clasped on the table. This is the most important interview you will give. Marin said. Her eyes were serious. Vance isn't interested in your childhood. She isn't interested in your feelings. She is interested in the statute. I understand. I said, do you? Marin challenged. Because your parents are going to try to drag this back into the realm of family dispute. They are going to claim this is about a daughter acting out. If you cry, if you get defensive, if you talk about how they hurt your feelings, you help their case. You look unstable. She pushed a notepad toward me. Stick to the facts. Marin commanded. Dates, signatures, documents. If she asks why you didn't speak up sooner, you don't say, I was afraid. You say, I was unaware of the existence of the entity until February 24th. Do not beg to be believed. Allison, state the truth as if it is boring. We practiced for 2 hours. Marin played the investigator, drilling me with questions designed to trigger an emotional response. But didn't you enjoy the benefits of your parents' wealth? I am financially independent. Isn't it true you have a history of depression? My medical history is irrelevant to the validity of the signature on the incorporation documents. Don't you love your sister? My relationship with my sister does not constitute legal consent for a $3 million liability. By the time we finished, I felt like a machine. I felt hollowed out, but armored. Before I left, Marin opened a file drawer. There is one more thing, she said. Her voice was quieter. We received a discovery packet from Harrow and Lyle this morning. They are trying to get ahead of the injunction. She slid a document across the desk. It was titled, Family Safety and Wellness Protocol. I picked it up. It looked like a standard legal agreement, dense with clauses and subsections. Read paragraph 4. Section B. Marin said, I looked at the text. In the event of a public dispute or legal challenge initiated by the beneficiary, Allison Bailey, the trustees, Thomas and Martha Bailey, reserve the right to disclose confidential medical and behavioral history to protect the reputational integrity of the foundation. Furthermore, the trustees are authorized to assume temporary power of attorney over the beneficiary's financial assets if said beneficiary demonstrates actions deemed erratic or harmful to the family estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. I read it again. They wrote this 2 years ago. I whispered, "Yes," Marin said. "This wasn't just a smear campaign, Allison. It was a preemptive legal strike. They anticipated that you might eventually fight back. So they wrote a contract that essentially says, if she complains, she is crazy. And because she is crazy, we own her." I felt nauseated. It was a trap. A carefully constructed, legally binding bear trap. They hadn't just stolen my signature. They had built a cage out of words and waited for me to step into it. If they had filed this, I said, looking up at Marin, if they had triggered this clause, they could have tried to take control of your bank accounts. Marin said, they could have tried to force you into a conservatorship. They framed their defense as protection. I put the paper down. I felt a profound, aching grief. I had spent so much time wondering why I wasn't good enough for them, why I couldn't make them love me, and all that time, they were consulting lawyers on how to neutralize me. I am not sad anymore, I said, my voice trembling with a hard, dark rage. I am done. Melody asked to meet me. She sent a text. Not through the family group chat, but directly to my number. Please, just 10 minutes. Neutral ground. The coffee shop on 4th. No parents. I debated ignoring it. But I needed to look her in the eye one last time. I needed to see if there was anything left of the sister I had shared a womb with, or if she was entirely consumed by the entity of the twins. I met her at a small cafe near the university, a place where nobody knew the Bailey name. Melody was sitting in a booth in the back. She wasn't wearing her usual ambassador uniform of pastels and pearls. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans. She looked smaller, without the lighting, without the makeup, without the parents hovering. She looked like a tired 25-year-old girl. I sat down opposite her. I didn't order anything. "Hi," she said. Her voice was small. "Hi, Melody." She wrapped her hands around a mug of tea. Her fingernails, usually perfectly manicured, were chipped. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. She said, "The lawyers are at the house every day. Dad is drinking at 10 in the morning." I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to offer comfort. Melody looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I didn't know about the clause," she said. "The power of attorney thing. Marin sent it to our lawyer. And he showed me. I swear. Allie, I didn't know they wanted to own you." I looked at her, searching for the lie. But I didn't see one. I saw fear. "You knew about the rest." I said, "You knew about the age change. You knew about the safety plan lies." "I know," she whispered. "I know I did." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you go along with it? Was it just for the party? For the attention?" Melody laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. "It wasn't for the party. Allie, it was because it was easy." She leaned back against the booth, looking defeated. "You were always the difficult one," she said. "Even when we were kids, you asked questions. You fought back. You made them angry. And when they were angry at you, they were nice to me. I wanted to be the one they smiled at. I wanted to be the easy one." She looked at me with a devastating honesty. "It is addictive," she said, "being the golden child. You get everything you want, as long as you don't ask if it is real." I just closed my eyes and let them write the story. I didn't think it would become criminal. I didn't think it would become real fraud. "You traded me," I said. "You traded my reality for your comfort." "I know," she said, "and I am sorry." She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. "Can you stop it?" she asked. "Can you tell the investigator it was a mistake? If you don't, Dad might go to jail. The foundation will collapse. I will lose my job. Everyone will know." I looked at her hand. "I didn't take it. I can't stop it." "Melody," I said, "the bank stopped it. The state stopped it. I just lit the match. The wood was already dry." She pulled her hand back. She nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I am going to leave," she said. "I can't stay in that house." "Good," I said. "You should." She stood up. She looked at me one last time, and I saw the tragedy of her life. She was 25, but she had no skills, no resilience, no identity outside of being a Bailey. She was the product of their vanity, just as I was the product of their rejection. In a way, they had destroyed us both. Goodbye, Melody, I said. She walked out of the cafe. I watched her go, and I felt the final tether snap. The investigation moved with the slow, crushing inevitability of a glacier. 2 days after my interview with Investigator Vance, the State Charities Bureau issued a formal suspension of the Bailey Future Trust's operating license pending a forensic audit. The purchase of the old mill was halted. The "sold" sign that had been prematurely placed on the lawn was removed by a city worker in an orange vest. The local news picked it up. Local foundation under review for financial irregularities. They didn't name me. They didn't name the unstable daughter. They named Thomas Bailey. The Arbordale Lifestyle blog posted a correction. It was a tiny paragraph at the bottom of their homepage, buried under a recipe for keto brownies. Correction: a previous version of the Bailey Family Spotlight contained unverified statements regarding the medical history of a family member. We retract those statements and apologize for the error. It was small, it was easy to miss, but it was there. I screenshotted it. I printed it out. I taped it to my refrigerator. It wasn't a ticker tape parade, but it was proof. Truth usually arrives in paperwork, not applause. The mediation was the final battlefield. Marin had advised against a face-to-face meeting, but the court required a mandatory mediation session before the civil injunction could be made permanent. It was a chance to settle out of court, to stop the bleeding before the criminal charges fully took hold. We met in a conference room at the courthouse. The table was long and scarred. My parents sat on one side, flanked by 2 lawyers from Harrow Lyle, who looked expensive and tired. Marin and I sat on the other. My parents looked terrible. My father had lost weight. His suit hung loosely on his frame. My mother looked brittle, her face a mask of tragic suffering. The mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, no relation to the banker, opened the file. We are here to discuss the removal of Allison Bailey's name from the corporate entities and the resolution of the alleged identity misuse. He said. My father's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, spoke first. Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth. The Bailey family maintains that this is a private misunderstanding. Miss Bailey has a history of confusion regarding family decisions. Her parents acted in her best interest, securing a future for her in the family trust. We are prepared to offer a settlement where Allison remains a silent partner, receiving a stipend, in exchange for sealing the records and withdrawing the fraud alerts. It was the same offer. Take the money. Shut up. Be the invalid we pay to stay away. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Allison, she said, her voice trembling, we just want to take care of you. Why are you doing this? You are not well. We can help you. She was doing it again, even here, in a legal proceeding. She was trying to spin the web. Marin didn't speak. She just looked at me. It was my turn. I reached into my bag. I pulled out 3 folders. I slid them across the table. This is not a misunderstanding, I said. My voice was calm. It didn't waver. I opened the first folder. This is the vendor timeline provided by your event coordinator. I said, it shows you editing the safety plan specifically to discredit me 2 months before the launch. I opened the second folder. This is the summary of findings from the Arbordale Regional Bank Fraud Review. I continued. It details the fabrication of tax returns listing me as an employee of a consulting firm I have never visited. My father flinched. Mr. Sterling reached for the paper, his frown deepening. And this, I said, opening the third folder. This is the death certificate of Arthur Pendleton, and the check signed by my father 2 months after Mr. Pendleton's heart stopped beating. The room went silent. Absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. My father looked at the check. The color drained from his face, leaving it the color of old ash. He knew that I knew, and he knew that this wasn't something he could charm away. This was embezzlement. This was the end. I looked at the mediator. I am not confused. Your Honor, I said, and I am not unwell. I am the victim of a systematic, documented fraud perpetrated by these two people. I will not accept a stipend. I will not be a silent partner. I looked at my parents. I want my name off everything. I said, I want a formal dissolution of my status as guarantor, and I want you to admit, on the record, that you put it there without my consent. My mother started to cry. It wasn't the pretty, single-tear crying she did for cameras. It was ugly, gasping, sobbing. Thomas, she wailed, do something. My father didn't move. He stared at the check. The great patriarch, the architect of the Bailey legacy, was just a man looking at a piece of paper that proved he was a thief. Mr. Sterling whispered something to my father. My father nodded. A jerk of his head. Mr. Sterling looked at the mediator. We agree to the removal, he said. His voice clipped. We will file the dissolution paperwork immediately. We agree to indemnify Ms. Bailey against all debts. And the admission? The mediator asked. Mr. Sterling stiffened. We cannot offer an admission of liability at this time, given the pending other investigations. They wouldn't say sorry. Of course they wouldn't. An apology would be a confession, and a confession would be prison. I looked at Marin. She gave a microscopic nod. It was enough. I accept the removal. I said, the meeting ended. We stood up. My mother looked at me across the table. Her face was ravaged. You have no family, she hissed. Do you understand? You are alone. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature, who had mocked my sanity, who had tried to legally own me. I have been alone for a long time. Mother, I said, at least now, I am safe. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. The packing took 2 days. I wasn't taking much, just my clothes, my books, and the few pieces of furniture I had bought with my own money. I left the things they had given me. I left the expensive vase my mother had sent for my birthday. I left the framed prints my father had chosen. I was moving to Briarhaven. Jonathan had set up the transfer. It was a promotion. Technically, a regional director title, but we both knew what it was. It was a witness protection program for the corporate world. I wasn't running away. I told myself that as I taped up the boxes. Running away implies you are afraid of what is behind you. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just done. I couldn't stay in Lake Arbordale. Every street corner reminded me of the lie. The bank on Main Street, the town hall, the bakery where my mother bought the almond pastries. My identity here was community property. It belonged to the scandal, in Briarhaven. I would just be Allison, not the twin, not the unstable one, not the whistleblower, just Allison. I loaded the last box into the rental truck. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at my apartment building. It had been my home for 5 years, but it felt like a set piece in someone else's play. I got into the driver's seat. I turned the key. The engine rumbled, a sound of forward motion. I didn't drive past my parents' house. I didn't drive past the old mill. I got on the highway and headed west, toward the mountains, toward a city where nobody knew my name. 2 weeks later, I was unpacking books in my new living room in Briarhaven. The apartment was airy, with big windows that looked out over the university campus. It was quiet. My phone buzzed on the floor where I had left it. It was a text from Kira. Hey, thought you should know. The Attorney General just raided the offices of Harrow and Lyle. I sat down on the floor. I stared at the screen. They seized the servers. Kira wrote, "It is bigger than your family. Allison." The firm was running a philanthropy mill for 20 different families, using foundations to hide assets, wash money, and evade taxes. Your dad was just one client. I typed back, "What about my parents?" Kira, "Indicted, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. Your sister is cooperating. She is testifying in exchange for immunity." I felt a pang of sadness, sharp and brief. Melody was testifying. She had finally found a way to survive that didn't involve smiling. But it meant destroying the people she worshipped. It was a tragedy. Ancient and inevitable. Kira. There is going to be a trial, a big one. The AG wants to know if you will talk to the press. You are the one who pulled the thread. You could be the face of the cleanup. I looked at the phone, the face of the cleanup. I could be the hero. I could go back and stand on the steps of the courthouse and tell my story. I could vindicate myself publicly. I could make sure everyone knew I was the sane one, the strong one. I looked around my new apartment. The sun was slanting across the floorboards. It was peaceful. There were no cameras here. No scripts, no expectations. I remembered my grandmother's voice. Keep your own name. If I went back, if I became the face of the scandal, I would be borrowing my name out again. I would be letting the story of the Baileys define me for another 10 years. I would be the hero daughter instead of the unstable daughter, but I would still be a character in their drama. I didn't want to be a character. I wanted to be a person. I picked up the phone. Me. No. Kira. Are you sure? It is a hell of a story. Me. I know, but it isn't my story anymore. It belongs to the state now. I put the phone down. I picked up a book. I walked to the shelf and placed it there. Right in the center. I was Allison Bailey. I lived in Briarhaven. I worked in logistics. And for the first time in my life, the rest of the page was blank. I smiled. And then I went back to unpacking. Thank you for listening to Stay Home, Nobody Wants You There. My parents threw my twin a huge 25th birthday party, but told me, this story of Allison Bailey explores the quiet, devastating violence of erasure and the courage it takes to reclaim your own reality. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to fight to be seen in your own family? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more deeply realistic dramas about justice, betrayal, and the complexities of the human heart. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.